People were dying. They didn't understand anything about the virus. I was losing friends left and right. You go out to the club and you say, well, where's so-and-so? And there's just the assumption that if they weren't there, that they were gone.
I'm doing everything that God has set out for me to do. I'm loving my neighbor. I don't preach hate. I teach people, I educate them. It doesn't matter if you are gay, straight, transgender, white, black. We are all one, and if you cut us, we're all gonna bleed the same. My name is Achim Jeremiah Howard, and I've been thriving with HIV for 9 years. November the 10th, 2011 was when I was diagnosed.
Reverend Wadley, 70-something years old. He did say from the pulpit one day, everybody got, and in their family, you got somebody that's got HIV. You got somebody who's gay, some of them out in the open, some of them not. You got somebody in your family who are drunk, some of them not. Everybody got some dirt in the family. And if you don't believe you got dirt in the family, take a bath, get in the tub, run nice big tub of bubble water, and let that water out. And see that ring around the tub? When you get out, that dirt came off of you. That was the best sermon I've ever heard at that church. My name is Linda Felix, and I have been thriving with HIV since 1986.
I had 4 T cells, I guess, for 5 years. And I used to go around saying, I got 4 T cells, but them some ninja bitches. They kicking ass. So my name is Nathan Townsend. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I was diagnosed with HIV in 1984.
I was actually driving around 285 looking for a telephone pole to wrap my truck around. Because I figured it would be easier for my parents to say that the brakes gave out on a truck than it would be for my son. Because at that point I thought I was dying. My son died of HIV. My name is Will Francis, and I've been thriving with HIV since 2009.
So even as I age, living with HIV, I've come to realize that I used to think that anything that went wrong with my body, it was HIV related. But then I had to realize that when you're getting older.
I'm Kevin English Taylor, and I've been thriving with HIV since 1988.
I thrive by letting the next person that's sitting in my office know that it's life after diagnosis. And I can share that with them because that's when I experienced life. I had so much going on as a kid to my initial diagnosis. I know I wasn't living.
I'm Freda Jones. I've been thriving with HIV for 18 years.
I wear my age as a badge of honor because the little heifer told me when I was diagnosed that I'd probably be dead in 10 years. And that was, like I said, 6 years ago. I'm still here.
I am here and part of this documentary and this project because I found my purpose in my diagnosis. And want to share some of the things that I experienced to help them find their purpose in theirs. I think for me, over the last 11 years, I think it's been a progression of who I would do a project like this for. It sort of started out for me to keep it in my box nice and neat. And then I would always be amazed that when I spoke, who would come up to me. It would be other heterosexual men, heterosexual women. It would be some gay men. It would be some bi men. It would be folks from the trans community. And then it started to become this whole clique of folks that were negative, right? And it just became one of those things. So I think for me, 11 years in, and I know y'all appreciate it, it's just really like whoever has an ear.
Right.
Let them listen. Right. And that's just sort of where I am in my space.
The reason I'm doing this documentary is because I want to erase the stigma of women that's diagnosed with HIV. Show a different face of women that's diagnosed with HIV. So I want someone else to know that you can thrive and you can get whatever you want to. I purchased a house, it'll be almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in October. But I want to let the next person know that just because of you have a diagnosis don't mean you cannot buy a house. It don't mean that you cannot be the best doctor, lawyer, school teacher, whatever it is you want to be. After your diagnosis, I want you to be that.
I've been working in the field of HIV for almost 20 years, and I've seen so much silence. And so I want to be the face for those who can't speak, who are afraid to speak for themselves and talk freely about their HIV, and let them know that because of an HIV diagnosis doesn't stop anything. The world is the sky is the limit, and there's a whole big old world out here to experience.
When I was diagnosed, I was told that I was the only trans man that had HIV. Wow. So at that time, I felt alone. So my mission is to bring awareness that anybody could get HIV. It doesn't matter who you are, what spectrum of the rainbow you come from, and to do away with the stigma, as well as to educate.
All of the progression and advances with medicine helped us to live longer, but didn't show us how to live longer. And so it's one of my missions is for all of us to stand here and say we are survivors, but we're surviving well and we're thriving well, and so can you.
My mission, once I was diagnosed in 1986, and I became okay with my diagnosis 10 years later, my mission became to make it okay for other women, to show that there were straight women, there were women who weren't drug addicts, who have been affected by HIV.
So I was diagnosed at the age of 23, young, engaged, had a baby on the way. So living in Illinois, it was a requirement to have a blood test done. And so when I went to my physician to get the results, that's when he told me that I was HIV positive. And that he also wanted me to bring my fiance so he can tell her too. And so I remember leaving the doctor's office and sitting in my car for a period of time, wondering what should I do. My mother and I are very close, and I wanted to speak with her or tell her first, but my physician's office was right near my fiance's house, so I decided to go to my fiance and let her know. I sat her down in her living room and disclosed my status to her. And I also told her that we didn't have to go ahead and get married, and that I would help take care of the baby. So we cried for a while, held each other, and we decided to go ahead and get married. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the very next day I went and told my mother.
I remember going to Big Grady. I'd come up from Florida, and I felt something in my neck here, a swelling. And I said to the resident, should I take one of those HIV tests? She says, well, you're not a man, and are you a drug user? No, well, you won't need that. My experience was so different because I was diagnosed, didn't believe it, told my mother, told Malcolm, called one other friend that was in the medical field and said, you're all right, just take care of yourself. And I, like I said, then I just kind of put it out my head, didn't talk about it, went through the whole thing with my cousin, never mentioned it, never discussed. But then my husband died, and I got his death certificate saying he had died of sepsis and renal failure due to AIDS. And I remember saying to Cheryl, I think I need to go see about this. Because they told me what time I was positive, I believe, but then let me go see about this. That was 9 years later. That was 9 years. And when I did get that confirmation, I really hated myself. At that time, it was drilled in your head that to have AIDS was a curse from God. You were being punished. And that lingered back there. I've had people say, how can you be so happy and being positive? Well, I don't understand this. Well, it didn't happen overnight.
I did not talk about HIV for 20 years.
Wow.
It wasn't until I got sick that I talked about it. Now, I volunteered, delivering meals. I was on the board of the organization, but I never acknowledged publicly that I had it. And so, looking back, I'm kind of ashamed of that aspect of it. But people, there is a pause between diagnosis and acceptance.
The period of my life in this journey with HIV, between diagnosis and acceptance and coming to a place of thriving, was a long, arduous journey. Make no mistake about it. By the 9 years later, after being diagnosed, when I finally presented myself at the infectious disease clinic, I had 75 T cells.
Wow.
But that stigma of being diagnosed with AIDS means that you're going to die still exists today. That's why a lot of people don't even want to be tested. They don't want to know if they have it.
So,
which is crazy to me.
Is crazy. That's why it's very important for people to see the work that we are doing. It's important I think it's important for people to be open with their diagnosis.
Yeah.
I think it's very important because people get to see a different face
and see how
HIV.
the work that we've done has led to two healthy, fine sisters sitting here. Okay? Got a whole lot more in the tank.
Exactly. A lot more in the tank.
My overall journey and getting to the point and the place that I am today, it was a difficult one. It had a lot of challenges. I thank my uncle for telling me to go get checked out, because as a trans man, the first thought of my mind was I didn't want to get pregnant. Right. Because that's a thing that I had to think about. You know what I'm saying? So he was like, go get checked out. So, because I just told him that I was sexually assaulted, but I never told him that I was HIV positive. I was told by my doctor that I was HIV positive. I remember that day like it was yesterday. When she told me, I was in a state of shock. I kind of like had an outer body experience. I cried the entire day. Because the first thought that came to me was that I was going to die. When I first became diagnosed, I was dealing with being sexually assaulted. I was also dealing with being angry that someone put something in my drink and took advantage of me. And then coming out of all of that, me ending up with HIV. So I was mad at the world. I was mad at I was just angry. Luckily for me, I had people in my circle who reached out to me, because what I would do was every day I'll get a wine bottle, a Moscato, and I'll get Patron, and I'll mix them both together. I'll go to one of my brother's house, and at the time he was married at the time, and his partner, they sat me down and they was like, if you calling us your brother, then you should be able to tell us what's going on with you. So it took me like 45 minutes to even come out to tell them that I was HIV positive. In the 80s, I was working at Howard University Hospital, and so I went into this wing and I saw all these guys wrapped up in white sheets. Some was laying on the gurneys, and others were sitting in chairs. It wasn't enough space, and they didn't have enough space for these people. So, but the ones that was laying up on the gurneys, you could see like the lesions on their skin, and they just looked real sickly. So I went back into the physical therapy department, and I told her what I saw. She said, "I told you don't go over there," but she said, "Yeah, they have AIDS," and that was the thought that I had when she was telling me that I was HIV positive. Even though I had people who were like my uncles and stuff like that living well with HIV, you know, but the process that came to me was dying, was death. I got assigned to a nurse. Her name was Dina. That woman right there was like, she was like what I feel like all nurses should be, all providers should be. She called me even on her days off just to check up on me. So that made me feel like my life was valuable. She made me feel like I wanted to live. Even went to my first living with, it was a support group, living well with HIV. And I remember sitting there, and I was listening to this guy, and I mind you, I was crying all day, and I was crying through the whole class, and the only thing that I remember him saying was that he had to take 19 pills, and he was doing that daily. I was like, 19 pills. I was like, tears just start streaming extra down my face. I just remember that. And she asked me, she said, "What's wrong?" And I told her, I said, if I gotta take more than 3 pills, I'm not taking anything.
I can remember maybe 3 or 4 years after my diagnosis, getting pretty sick and having to take a lot of medications. I remember having to take 19 different pills, or a total of 19 pills a day. Some pills I had to take during the day, some in the evening, some pills with food, some pills without food, but a total of 19 pills. And you talk about pill burden, that was a struggle, having to take all those pills on a daily basis.
Yeah, my depression came with diagnosis. I had failed myself, my parents, you go through all of that. I was drinking, but I was still going out every day, but I wasn't going to work. I was actually driving around 285 looking for a telephone pole to wrap my truck around. Because I figured it would be easier for my parents to say that the brakes gave out on a truck than it would be for my son, because at that point I thought I was dying. My son died of HIV, and having that foundation in the church, I'm trying to pray, but all I heard was God laughing. Wow. Because how I was praying was, I need to hit this pole just right. I don't want to feel no pain, leave the face intact for the casket. Y'all laughing at my pain.
You want to be a pretty corpse.
I mean, at the end of the day, but that's where, because, black folks want to open caskets. So these were the retarded prayers that were coming out, right? And that's what he was laughing at. Like,
you had to hit the pole triangle.
Right. I had to hit it. I didn't want to, come out paralyzed or whatever. I did, I don't want to feel nothing. So of course he wasn't going to answer those type of prayers. But I had all of this noise in my ear for the first time. And you're no good, you're a failure, ain't nobody gonna want you. All of this stuff was like hitting me, like literally going around 285. And it wasn't until after diagnosis, when I went back into church, hey, here I am. It was literally 40 days from diagnosis to my first doctor's appointment when I found out I was undetectable, and I fell on the floor because I heard there's nothing that can be done. I didn't know what undetectable was. But for me, once I understood, okay, it's not over, then I had to begin.
Right.
It was, and I look back on that experience, because it would have been so easy There's a quadrillion telephone poles that I could have hit, but something in my mind was this 285 thing, and I preached on that it was predestined that they're literally drive around 285. The big poles all have a gate in front that I couldn't get to. Said so even in that, I had a praying grandmother. Yeah, I could do, back on it, right? But that's what blocked me. That gate was what was blocking me from ending it. And then once I came out of that depression, it was like, okay, we need and I think you said it earlier about reset, do this again.
Yeah.
Okay, where do we start?
Right.
And I did the counselor thing, which I think was interesting enough. It was 8 weeks, and I talked for the whole hour. And she would close a little book, and she would say, I'll see you next week. Now, in my mind, I'm leaving like, Linda ain't no good. She ain't said nothing. So I finally asked her at like 6 weeks, how come you don't ever say anything? Because she said, all you need to do was to get it out.
Yep.
And literally, once I got it out and I was emptied, then I could go ahead and begin the filling process all over again.
People were not being buried. They were not having memorial services. It was a time where you didn't want to share your diagnosis because you didn't want to predict or project how that was going to play out. Like, you knew you were HIV positive, but they had no script or no mapping to tell you if you were going to go from HIV positive to AIDS. There was not this culmination of knowledge that they have today. And so everything was up in the air. And so it was my choice to just live my life like my life. I didn't talk to anybody about it. I volunteered for AIDS organizations. I delivered Meals on Wheels and did stuff like that. And so I guess, I don't know if I want to say I was in denial or if I just felt like it was not significant at that point. And so it got to a point where I had 4 T cells for a long time. And it was insignificant to me. It wasn't an issue because I still had never been sick. So I went from 1984 to 2004 before I had my first and only bout of sickness. The only things I had gone through were side effects. And the side effects were the most horrific times, the most embarrassing times. Like, I would be on the expressway in Philadelphia driving, and all of a sudden it's like, go. Like, not no warning. You just say, go. And I had to pull off the side of the road and go into the bushes and go to the bathroom. And that was like kind of an embarrassing type time, because even at one time I was sitting in a gas station. It was the same thing. I had to just go in the car on myself. And so there were just things about the medication that made life very difficult and made it so you had to plan your route. You had to know where clean bathrooms were. You had to know what your diet was. There were so many things that you had to be concerned with just to be able to live a natural life.
I don't have a HIV story. I have a life experience. So before I was diagnosed, I experienced child molestation at a very young age. And due to the child molestation, I had low self-esteem all my life, but I didn't know it until I understood what low self-esteem is and what made me vulnerable to getting infected. So all my entire life, I was settling for somebody that didn't take sex from me.
So for me, when I was diagnosed, I know I still had low self-esteem because I was dealing with the guys that I just dealt with guys, that didn't encourage a better woman. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how to be a better woman for damn self. I didn't know that. And when I found out my diagnosis, I decided to stay with the guy. I stayed with him another year, knowing that he gave me this diagnosis. I still stuck with this guy another year. But the thing about it, I started volunteering in the community. I started working in the community. And I would go home sometime and tell him about the stuff that I learned. Oh, I don't want to hear about that HIV shit. Don't bring that in this house. And I was like, man, I thank God blessing me. I'm finna keep on talking about this. And I kept on. So we ended up breaking up. But I wanted him to get in care so bad. I wanted him to take his medication so bad because I seen what the meds did for me. I seen what it did for me. You know, I got my viral load undetectable. My T cells went up because when I found out, my T cells was only 236 when I found out my diagnosis. That was 36 away from having an AIDS diagnosis. But once I got on my medication and I seen what the medicine was doing for me, I wanted him to get the same thing. But he didn't want that. He stayed in denial until he passed away. I can say that denial and stigma is what took this young man.
Yep.
The denial and stigma. He refused to take medication and all of that. But to talk about me, I never had a down moment when it comes down to my diagnosis. I just never have. My only down moments has been, no, I'm not gonna say down moments. My down moment was relationship. It had nothing to do with HIV. You know, I've always taken care of it, keeping my doctor's appointments, doing what they tell me to do. Actually, if it wasn't for HIV, I don't think I'd be the woman I am today. To be totally honest with you, I don't think I'd be the woman that I am today if it wasn't for my diagnosis. I can truly say my diagnosis grew me up to become the woman that I am today. At the age of 32, I can say I wasn't even a grown woman yet. And I had my 4 kids.
Wow.
And I already had accomplished my business, you know, my hair business. I had already accomplished all that, but I wasn't grown. At the age of 32, I wasn't grown at all.
So let me tell you, this is my little fashion accessory thing. Because it's too far downstairs to be trying to change. So I ain't Diana Ross. I ain't had the bill. I'll keep these shoes on. Because y'all look like y'all taking a cellar. Y'all don't have to throw that stuff up in the air and be thinking, I know y'all. Keep sitting there waiting. Say, I like them ones you got on right now. Throw them this way. All right. So like one of our first jobs was modeling. And I y'all got the shit hanging. Oh, now I'm about to go to work. All that time I'm saying I know that they can't work. I say one little word. It wasn't me, y'all. It wasn't me.
By 1987, I found myself involved in a relationship, as I mentioned earlier, with a man. I knew I hated him. He turned around and slapped me.
Oh,
Yeah. And I accepted that.
So did you accept that because of your diagnosis?
I accepted that because my self-worth was in the toilet.
Okay.
I did not feel like I was worthy. I never liked that man.
Self-sabotage.
Okay, self-sabotage, exactly. Because I hated me.
Wow.
And that's why this whole journey to disclosure, like I said, it's a journey. It's not something that happens overnight that gets us sitting here. And somehow or another, I ran into him after my diagnosis. And I got into a relationship. It was a violent relationship, something that I never, ever in the past would have ever accepted. But I felt that I didn't deserve anything more. I didn't deserve to be treated any better, because after all, I had the package. I had the AIDS.
The hardest part about dating, and still is disclosure. And even being a person that has been in magazines and news articles splashed across Facebook and other social platforms, when it comes to liking someone, you know, meeting that special guy or girl, whatever your preference is, for me, it is the hardest thing to just say that I'm HIV positive. And I think that it's that one hinge of rejection. It's like everything is hinging upon that one simple yes or no, or I am too, or I don't care, or I'm on PrEP. Every time it's a journey. Every time it's an effort. And I don't know, I can think probably of one time that someone told me first that they were positive. And I just thought the world of that. And so I try to take that feeling, I try to take how I felt when they opened up to me and disclosed first, which took away all of my angst, took away all of my concerns. And I think even if a person is negative, if they know what the situation is, they can deal with it accordingly.
Let's talk about dating with the diagnosis. At the moment, I am single, and it's single by choice. But in the past 18 years of being diagnosed, I have been in relationships. And I can say I have had some rejections. Not many, but I have had some rejections when it comes down to dating with the diagnosis. And some of those rejections, come to find out, they had nothing to do with me. And I don't ever look at it has anything to do with me. It don't. It's more of the virus itself. It has nothing to do with me because I am a person. I am human. I think I'm an attractive woman. I can turn a couple of heads still, but
Yes, ma'am.
can turn a couple of heads, But when it comes down to dating and HIV and having the virus, I can say this without a doubt. It has matured me. Because back in the days, I used to want to be in a relationship so bad to where I was settling for guys that did not deserve all of this love that I have because I wanted to be in a relationship. So now I have matured so much mentally that I'm okay. Do I want to be in a relationship? Yeah, of course I do. But do I have to be in one? No, I don't have to be in one anymore. Like back then, I used to think I had to be in a relationship and used to think that it determined who I was, But now I know that I don't have to be in one.
When I look back at how far we were and how far we progressed, and to be able to live in that time, to see that transgression, to see life traverse through all of the different hurdles and all of the different challenges, has, its benefits. But I've never been able to consider marriage. That was not something as a same gender loving person. It was even on the horizon. People had long-term relationships, and they considered themselves to be, a family unit, but there was no allowance. It wasn't legal. It wasn't recognized. It wasn't acknowledged. It wasn't validated. It wasn't affirmed. It wasn't accepted. It wasn't received well.
I'm looking forward to being married to the love of my life, Miss Saria Sinclair Jackson. I'm about to start cleaning up for the people that's coming in for the space. Right there, that is the president of the LGBT Center of New Orleans, Community Center of New Orleans, as well as my better half.
Better half.
Yes. But when I first saw her, I'm gonna tell you, I told one of my brothers, I said, that's gonna be my wife. And Lord and behold, I was right. So yeah, it's like because I have never said that about anybody, just seeing a person and to see the God in them. This is everything about her, and the most thing that I love her is about her love for God. And I've always looked for a woman who is, the love for God is there, not religious but spiritual.
She said, "Are you hurt?" I said, "Sure, but who are you?" I said, "God really is a woman?" I'm looking up like this. I'm like, where's it was my own story. No, I thought I lost it. Seriously, I was like, okay, this is how it's gonna go down. I didn't get my home. So, the man walks 20 feet down to me and said, are you hurt? I said, what do you think? He said, well, you were just sitting there. I said, where should I have been? So go call the cops and do something else. My car was totaled.
It's a bitch to get old, honey. You know, the whole thought is in my head. Maybe I just don't want to say it. Those places where you go to die. Where you go to die. And there were times when friends who did die, no one would ever say that they died from AIDS-related complications. It would always be, they would claim the pneumonia, not realizing that people knew that pneumonia was code for AIDS death. But people, they wouldn't have funerals. People would, at first the funeral parlors would refuse to have embalm them, so ultimately you were left with the decision to have that person cremated and then do a memorial service. And that was my first experience with memorial services, and they were so abundant that it was just, you were worshiping a photo of a person, a mere two-dimensional, three-dimensional memory that was so inhumane, that was so impersonal, that was so unloving. And that was the order of the day. And many of those were even coordinated by friends of the deceased because family either did not have it or didn't want to be a part of it. And that was really sad. Many of us were robbed of planning for the future, you know, because we were told that our futures were not going to be that meaningful or that long, you know. I was able to cash in my life insurance because the doctor certified that I had less than 2 years to live. And although I was amped up and psyched about getting, you know, that much cash, it wasn't enough to buy my future. It wasn't enough to buy my dreams. I want to tell them that I found out that the good news was that the bad news was wrong.
Mm.
The
I
good
like that.
news is that the bad news was wrong.
Yeah.
All those bad things that they say would happen, it was wrong. All the things I was afraid about, it was wrong. The best part of me, like you said, Freda, was discovering myself in this new way of being and realizing that my life now matters. Before, my life only mattered for me. And it didn't really have that, you know, deep of a meaning, you know, and now, you know, life has purpose. And I lived in the moment because they said we didn't have but moments.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Right, and so living in the moment was an acquired skill. But then I had to learn to live past those moments when we start living longer.
And live life.
And so the thriving part is about being able to adapt. Take HIV out of the picture. Life is an exercise of adapting. Over challenge, over struggle, whatever. You don't know who you are until you're stretched.
Right.
And so for me, it's about being stretched and knowing that I didn't pop. So, today's a good day, today's a new day. And I probably had a week long of celebrating 66. And 66 years old for me is an incredible journey, but also an incredible accomplishment. I've been HIV positive longer than I've been, it's a lion's share of my life. I've been longer than I have not been HIV positive. I've been HIV positive for 36 years, and I have 30 years to add on to that. I never thought that I would see this. I never thought that life would exist past HIV. I'm so glad that it does.
Well, today is a special day. Today is my birthday. It's bittersweet. Thinking about turning 55 today and not thinking that at one point that I'd reach my age of 30. So I'm excited.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Come on, choir. Happy birthday, dear Gertie. Happy birthday to you. And many more to come? And many more. So touched.
In August, I will be 50 years old. That is an accomplishment within itself, because all the struggles that I've been through being homeless for 5+ years, to being sexually assaulted, having guns put to my head, I'm still here. I made it. And it's by the grace of God that I'm still here, and I thank God for him. August the 29th this year, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., my hometown, Will City, where I am a native, born and raised. And I will be doing the National Action Network March. I want to do this march. It's not only for Freddie Gray and George Floyd. It's for me to show that before you see my transness, you'll see my blackness.
We don't get no justice now. We're gonna shut it all down.
This moment is a reminder that we must always honor the sacrifice of the leaders who made that march happen.
We're gonna shut it all down. Hardy, 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 ho. Hardy, 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 ho. These racist cops have got to go. These racist cops have got to go. If we don't get no justice now. We don't get no justice now. We're gonna shut it all down. We're gonna shut it all down. We're gonna shut it all down.
I recently got stopped by the police officer for coming from Texas. I thank God that it wasn't a George Floyd situation. God was on my side, but that whole time, I was scared. I was scared out of my wit. The whole time I was just racing, cause you know, there were police officers attacking black men for no reason at all. And Tony McDade is a trans man who was recently killed by the police officer. But not one time is his name mentioned in the Black Lives Matter. They always mention everybody else, but if you notice, they never mention his name. And so I speak his name today, and I will be marching in the memory of him, as well as in the life of myself and other black trans men. Because before you see our transness, you see our blackness. And I feel as though this Black Lives Matter movement, it's a good movement, don't get me wrong, but it should be for all black people, whether you are whatever. If you're black, you should be included in the Black Lives Matter. And I know by me marching, me protesting, this would also help another individual, such as a trans man that's coming up, a young trans man who's coming into his existence right now. I want him to be able to live and walk down the street, be able to be proud of who he is, and you know, and just be proud of himself that he's able to be free. Because right now, We might be free physically, but a lot of us are not free mentally. And until we get there, we got a lot of work to do.
Was thinking about the early days of HIV and living here in the South. And I thought about what was it that helped me go beyond shame and stigma associated with HIV and the self-hatred that came with that. And it was the strangest thing. I had a terrible probation officer who was really hard on me. But his brother was a doctor and an HIV doctor, and so he was familiar with HIV and all the things that went along with it. And he asked me, had I been in any support programs? And I remember saying, no, I didn't want to be bothered with none of that. He insisted, and as a part of my probation, that I must attend an HIV education project. And he gave me a couple names, and one of those names, the very first one I went to, as a matter of fact, to visit, was Our Common Welfare. Our Common Welfare, OCW, was the greatest thing that could ever have happened for me. That's where I met Faye Brown Sperling and Pat Brown. They were the founders and directors of Our Common Welfare. And I remember the night I went in and I met Pat. And I said, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be around no whole bunch of people feeling sorry for themselves because they got HIV and talking about how sitting around waiting to die. I'm not even interested. I only came here because he made me come so I could say I've been here. She said to me, well, we have a meeting tonight. She said, would you stay maybe just 30 minutes and see what you think? So I agreed, and I was just so hostile if you would have talked to Pat today. I don't want to be here, I ain't going to sit here, I ain't had nothing to talk about, I don't want to. She said, well, would you stay for 30 minutes? Mm-hmm. I wound up staying for 5 years. And it changed my life. Meeting Faye Brown Sperling and Pat Brown and the whole OCW experience changed my life. So even somebody, we thought my probation officer was the worst person in the world. Even as hard as he was, he did something that was a plus for me. I loved OCW. I learned so much there about myself, about the disease, about how to handle other people, how to walk through this, how this disease lived with me. I didn't live with it. It lived with me, and I was in control.
So what makes me happy? Being around my family. My family is real close, but more importantly, being with my grandkids. I have 4 grandkids. They're 5, 6, 12, and 14. And they bring me a whole lot of joy, and they complete my life. They also keep me young. I try to do activities with them, have adventures with them, just make life fun for them. I'm sitting here with my only granddaughter. This is Kaylin.
Hi.
So we're gonna talk about. So, question: when did you first learn about my HIV status?
I can't remember, like a few years ago. Or like,
a few years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you heard about it, well, tell me how you felt or what you thought.
I thought it's like you could die from it, like it was no cure, or like nothing until you told me about it.
So you thought I was gonna die?
Mhm.
So at what point did you realize that I wasn't gonna die, or did you ever get to that point?
I did get to that point when you told me you had medicine for it.
Okay. And what do you know about the medication?
That it doesn't cure you, but it helps you.
True. That's correct. It'll help me maintain my life and keep me healthy. So have you ever told any of your friends that your granddad has HIV?
No.
No? Do you feel like, so what do you think would, how do you think any of your friends would respond if you were to tell them?
They will probably do the most about it.
They what?
Do the most about it.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
Like they will be like shocked, or like they'll see me different or see you different.
So how do you think them seeing you different affects you? I don't understand. Explain what that is.
They'll think I'm gross or something because my grandpa has HIV.
That you're a ghost?
Gross.
Oh, okay. Do you think they might think you have it too?
Yeah, probably.
Why do you think that?
Because I live in a house with you and people don't understand what you went through.
Okay. So do you think you can educate your friends about HIV?
Yeah.
What would you tell them about HIV?
I'll tell them that I don't know how to put it, that you can, hold on, let me think. It's a disease that you can be cured from it. Well, not cured, but
right.
You can get better and not be sick. And if you don't take the medicine, you could die.
You could get sick or die.
Yeah, and it's not anything bad.
Okay.
But I don't know how to explain it.
So, for any other kids that are out here that will see this this video, what message would you give another child who either one of their parents or their grandparent has HIV and they are worried or concerned?
That as long as they're taking their medicine, they'll be fine. They'll be strong.
Okay. And any final words? Final messages?
I love my grandpa, and he been strong for like 55. How long you been having it?
32 years.
32 years, and he's still living to see 55.
I live with the guilt and shame. I loved Billy so much and took care of him. He was a good guy. I knew I had been diagnosed. Billy died. I never told him in all that time that I was also positive. I never was able to admit to him or or to myself at that point, I guess, that I was positive. Now I had told people when I got diagnosed, but then I put it over there.
Packed it away.
I put it over there in the bathroom and closed the door, locked that room up. And I always feel a sense of guilt that I was not able, that maybe that might have been something that could have helped him as he transitioned, to make it easier for him. I don't know that, but I just know that I was too ashamed to admit to my cousin that I too was living with this, and I helped him and watched him die.
There came a time when HIV was all that I was involved with, and I think that was a journey that took a span of 36 years. But within that time, I went from being a victim to being a survivor. I went from being a client to being a provider. I went from being weak to being strong. I went from being closed to being open. I went from being shut down to being fully transparent. And it was a journey that I don't regret.
So when I first got diagnosed, everything has to be HIV, right?
Right.
Yeah. Wear every HIV t-shirt that you get your
Right.
do all of that. So y'all remember the greater than AIDS symbol?
Yeah.
So I had a little t-shirt on, thought I was rocking it or whatever. I was in the airport heading somewhere. And this lady was like, "What's that mean?" So I'm all, here's my time to be an advocate, right? Like, I got this whole speech, and I said, "Oh, it's greater than AIDS."
Yeah.
She was like, "Ain't nothing greater than that shit." I sat in my own little bubble for just like a couple minutes, and I had to think about it.
Yeah.
Because with all the stuff that I had been through,
Yeah.
HIV was that one thing that I was so worried about. And when she said that in an odd kind of way, I was like, out of all the obstacles I will face in life, HIV should be the greatest one that I have to overcome. And that sort of like put me on this whole thing. You talked about purpose earlier, about really thinking about the purpose, that if I can get over this mountain that I've created for myself, because ain't nobody else created it for me. If I can get over this mountain, then there's this other stuff that's on the other side. And I'll never forget that. I haven't worn that t-shirt since. I still have it, but I ain't put it back on. Because she said it. It was just so matter-of-factly, but she really messed me up.
Yeah.
But it caused me to have like this internal conversation with myself. Like, really, what have you faced in life? If this is your greatest challenge, if you can get through this one, everything else should be easy peasy. So laying down at night, I mean, it's the, I shouldn't have ate that for dinner. What am I gonna have for breakfast? Oh, I forgot to call this. I forgot to do this. I mean, it's just the regular life stuff, right? Stuff like that. But it's really at this point for me, it's time to go to bed and get up the next morning and do it all over again.
I think what happens is, after you get over the initial fear, denial, self-hatred, all the various things you go through once you get diagnosed, you'll be afraid of nothing no more.
Yeah.
Only thing I think about is, I don't want to lose my mind, wind up with Alzheimer's. That's a terrible thing. I've seen people with it. It's no joke. And so every morning, I thank God for waking. I'm like the old folks I used to hear them say in church, "Thank you for waking me this morning with a reasonable portion of health and clothed in my right mind." Please. I know what you're talking about. Hallelujah.
For so long, I was able to navigate and weave in and out of society without even identifying or recognizing or acknowledging my HIV status, because I was going to a primary care provider. I was sitting in the midst of other people with other illnesses that were anonymous. I didn't have to face my reality of being HIV positive, because I immersed myself in a sea of people that did not have to disclose what was going on with them.
One of the things that I found with disclosure, doing this work for all these years, is that, especially with young people, when they get a diagnosis, is that first thing come out of their mouth is either, "I can't tell my parents," or "I can't tell my best friend." And I'm like, well, what kind of friends you got that you can't tell your best friend? I can kind of understand the parents.
Right.
And then on the flip side of that, I've seen diagnosis after disclosure bring families together. And so we overthink what may happen, but sometimes we got to stick our toe in the water to test the water. Just find that one person that you may be able to talk to or to get some support. But just to hold all that in for years and years is not good on your body. It's not good for your diagnosis.
There are times when I don't feel like talking about it. There are times when I don't want to have that conversation. And so in those times, for me, I pull back and I retreat. Because for me, it's too much to go past that point without disclosing. And if I don't feel comfortable enough to disclose, maybe it's not for me. And so my hope is that as much as I'm publicly open, that hopefully someone who is already aware of what I bring to the table, and bring to the table is everything. It's all that I am, including HIV, to know that I'm worthy of more than an entanglement. How about that?
I don't know if it's more so radical or an evolution of thought. That when I first got diagnosed, I thought it was just so very important to say that I was HIV positive through heterosexual contact. I gotta get this out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And as I evolved in my diagnosis and my thought got into ministry, I started to think a lot less and less with my HIV work around sexuality. Because what difference does it make?
Right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, what difference does it make? I either like you as a person or I don't. Right? But if I continue to put you in these boxes, there's no gay community, there's no faith community, there's no women's community, it's a community. Right? Our community, a black community, whatever that. And I think we do this so much, right, that we don't ever come together in forums like this. I don't have to necessarily agree with you, but I can have a conversation with you because you're Nathan, or you're, Kevin and I fuss all the time, right? Not because of where we are on this sexual triangular triangular scale. It's just because of just who we are, right? So I've always thought, and even with ministry, I don't see homeless, I don't see poor. If you're hungry, you're hungry.
Yes.
Here's a sandwich, black, white, regardless, here's a sandwich. And then let's go ahead and connect with that person first.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, look, ain't nobody know what we are, right? When I walk into the room, you can assume I'm black, but you don't know what part of blackness I am, right? So that has always been a thing that I personally have struggled with, and in certain forums, I'm sort of silent about it because I think they are, speaking as a pastor, that they are two equally important conversations, but we always make them the same conversation. And I personally feel that reattaches stigma if we say HIV in one breath and gay in the other breath, right? And then when you were saying about the churches, if we're still going to churches that have to open their doors, then they ain't the churches that we need to go to.
Exactly.
And I had to step out of that because you accepted me prior to. I was, I can't sing, but I was on the choir usher board, tithing member. I did all of those things. But as soon as you found out that I was HIV positive, it was like all of a sudden we went to Wi-Fi prayer, right? You can't touch me no more. You can't be a part of this ministry. You can't do this. You can't do that. We can't even give you communion.
Oh, wow.
Right? We can't give you communion because you may infect somebody else in the church. So tell you what, here's a church finger, and I'm not using this one. Here's a church finger, and let me go someplace where they will accept the whole thing, right? And I think that's where it sort of started with my own experiences, and I think that's where a lot of my thought concerning just HIV in general, that we have to stop being divided on lines of sexuality and this, that, and the other, and come together as one. And we will find we've had nothing but commonality all day.
Yeah.
You and I would have went to get beers. But if I divide us on our sexuality because I don't understand that or whatever, then we never get to know each other, and I don't get to grow from you. You don't get to grow from me. So I think we have to be kind of careful. That's just sort of my thought in using dividing lines.
And there's a richness in being diverse.
Yes.
Because, you know, that just me being him is one dimensional.
Right.
You know, when I open up to all, I'm expressing and entertaining and enjoying, a cacophony of lived experience.
But we don't do this enough. We don't do this enough. We don't sit down and we don't talk about the issues that just matter as a person or whatever. We want to have a gay group, and we want to have a women's group, or we want to have this. At some point, we have to come together and just have a conversation. The relationship issues that a female in Lotus is struggling with is the same issues that someone in Thrive or I'm sitting over here struggling with, because it all comes down to acceptance, self-worth. I mean, all of those things. So that's just my
The
little
human
two
experience.
And we all want to be accepted, and we all want to be loved.
Right, and if we can't accept ourselves and we want to allow folks to put walls, that I'm not supposed to associate with you because you're different, then I'm no better than anybody that's telling me that I need to associate myself with my kind.
I know for trans men, we were left out of the spectrum at one point in time all together, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't until I started advocating for myself, and I noticed I started advocating for others, that we started being a part of the conversation. And that's what needs to happen. It needs to be a everyday conversation where you can educate other people. Let it be a normal topic. Gender identity is who I am. I am a man. That's who I identify as. Sexual orientation is who you, what you prefer, whether you're gay, whether you're straight. It doesn't have anything to do with trans, because I had gotten people to ask me, well, you're transgender, what made you change? It was all that's in line and inside of me, that's just coming out on the outside. I'm still the same person, but on the outside, it's just that I want my outside appearance to feel what I was feeling on the inside. I have always, when I can remember since I was a kid, everybody thought I was a tomboy. No, that was who I am. I played football, played basketball, all of that, ran track. Even the guys, they was like, yeah, you one of the guys, but it's all about respect too. Cause some people will ask questions on personal stuff like surgeries and stuff. That's not your concern. What's concern is that you respect the person that's in front of you. If somebody present themselves and say that they're a trans man or they're a trans woman, expect that. Gender identity, that's who I am. And who I sleep with, that's the sexual orientation. And I'm heterosexual. I sleep with women. When I was growing up, I used to go to church all the time, but they would always say that I was an abomination. But I always believed that if I'm an abomination, why am I still here? I had guns put to my head. People used to fight me because of who I am. Why am I still here? There's a reason for that. A lot of us don't come out saying that we are trans, and we do that because it is for our safety. I know I mentioned to you earlier, I've been beat up because of me being trans. Oh, you think you're a man? Let me show you what a man is. A man is not what's between your legs, it's between what's here and what's here. And it's a lot of guys don't get that, but that's what it is. Community is not, when it comes to trans men, that's the hard thing. It's hard to find trans men because they live their life stealth, meaning that they don't want anybody to know they're a trans man. So they go day to day it's because of the safety factor. But as far as me being out there as an advocate, everybody knows I'm a trans man. That is the difficult thing right now that I am facing, is community. Finding where I belong here in Louisiana, New Orleans. Finding how I can make a difference day by day. Yeah, that is my biggest struggle. It all comes to a point where you have to accept yourself for who you are, and you got to start that by loving who you are, loving yourself. You can't expect anybody else to love you if you can't love yourself.
Yes.
You know, one thing I hear from all of us is that being diagnosed and coming to terms with that diagnosis, because we all had to come to terms with it.
Right.
It's not something you go, oh yeah, gay, wonderful, happy, so much, so glad I got diagnosed with. No, it doesn't work that way. But once we finally came to terms with it, we found our purpose in life.
The weather's nice. We forget all about the worries of what's going on at home and in the world. Get some serenity and talk to God. Even looking up at the nice blue skies. Couldn't ask for anything better than this. So even with living with HIV, it's still a whole wide world out here to enjoy and not just focus on the disease, the virus itself, and what comes along with it. And I always feel like, you know, life is what you make it. So I'm making the best of living with HIV and the life that God has afforded me.
If it wasn't for HIV, I don't know where I would be. I don't know where my life would be if it wasn't for me getting diagnosed with HIV. Will I still be dealing with people that didn't deserve all knuckleheads, people that didn't deserve all this love that I have, okay, you know, all this stuff inside me, you know. I wonder, you know, sometimes I sit and think about that. I wonder, will I still be dealing with those type of guys? But you know what? I still wasn't done yet. I still wasn't done. I can say just 2 years ago, in July 2018, that was it. That was the shroud in. I can say July 2018. It's just now 2020. So yeah. And I can really say I'm really proud of who I am now. I'm really proud of that.
Now, if you want to live your life in fear, you can live your life in fear, and you can sit down and wait to die.
Right.
Yeah. And guess what will happen?
You will die. And probably a lot quicker.
And a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you determine that you have some things to do, to buy a house.
Yeah.
Have grandkids.
Have grandkids.
Yeah. Many.
All right.
She got a whole village.
To move beyond your looking for stardom through someone else to here's something that I can do. To sharing with those who are the least of these. That's how you thrive. That's how you get beyond your diagnosis.
Right.
No, it's not going to be easy. But who the hell told you life was supposed to be easy?
Right.
If you have HIV, you can live positive. Yes, you're gonna have some bumps and bruises along the way. There will be some challenges, but you can live with it, and it's not a death sentence as I thought it would be.
I just hope that something that we have said here rings a bell for somebody. Because that's really all we're trying to do. We're trying to open up the mind and the heart to the possibility that you can live with this, you can do better, you can embrace your brother, your sister who has this, and let them know that you still love them. They are still the same brother or sister that you grew up with as a child. You don't have to be afraid of them. You don't have to be afraid to let them be with your baby, your child at this point in time, because a lot of that still goes on, and we don't want anyone else to be, as we've heard all the stories, kicked out of their house.
And we as marginalized people, we know how to survive. We know how to survive the streets, we know how to survive relationships, we know how to survive financial woes, but what we don't know how to do is thrive. And I think that what we really are sharing today is that we acknowledge that you can survive. But we want you to know that you can thrive
Thrive.
as well.
Yes.
And it's so much better. It's so much different. Don't just survive. Thrive.
Thrive.